folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the human adventure, all through the lens of this great tool we call the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. I'm so glad you're here. We've got a really great guest today. She has a brand new book called The Magic of Knowing What You Want, a practical guide to unearthing the wisdom of your desires. And she has some really cool ways of getting to what you really want, what you really desire. We actually talk about the difference between want and desire on this podcast. But really, really cool. Her name is Tracey Gee. She is a type 3, wing 2. She's the counter type 3. We get into that a little bit on this podcast as well. I know you're going to want to read this book as well, The Magic of Knowing What You Want. So without any further ado, that's it for me, Anthony Skinner. And now here is the host, the man of the hour, Ian Cron.
Drumroll, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to Typology our new friend, Tracey Gee. She is an Enneagram 3 with a 2 wing, but more importantly, she is the author of the new book, The Magic of Knowing What You Want, a practical guide to unearthing the wisdom of your desires. Tracey, welcome to Typology.
Thank you for having me.
So delighted. So you are an Enneagram 3. How did you learn about the Enneagram? And tell me, what was your initial reaction? Like, what resonated? What did you resist?
I first found a book, I believe it was by Richard Rohr, about the Enneagram. And I was in my late 20s. I was in vocational ministry. So I was working for a nonprofit that was working with college students and, going through a lot of the struggles I think you do in your 20s and trying to figure out my path, trying to figure out who I was. At the time, I was having a lot of conflict with my parents. They were pretty unhappy about my chosen life path, and we were kind of butting heads about that. And, I think I hit a point where I was reading about my type, and I was like, oh my goodness, who has been reading my journal? Mm-hmm.
Wow.
How did this information get on this page? Because it just was very convicting and very revealing. So I know sometimes people, I don't know, I still feel a little embarrassed when I admit my type because I'm like, ooh, this is, all the shadow stuff that goes into it, all the real vulnerable parts of my heart. I was like, oh, it knows me. This is real.
Yeah, it knows me. That's I've never heard someone say that, but that actually is kind of like, why does this thing know me? And it can cause a little bit of discomfort, right? Mm-hmm. So how has knowing your Enneagram type, though, affected the way that you do life, right? Because it's been some time. And as you look back, like, how has it brought benefit to your life?
Well, like I said, I discovered it then, and then I kind of came back to it. There's a story I tell in the book, actually, where I went up for a promotion in my organization and, long story short, did not get it. And I think I heard someone say once that you've never seen anybody as sad as an Enneagram 3 who has failed.
That's Richard.
And that was me. Okay, yes,
Richard said that.
That is the realest statement I've ever heard. And it just sent me on a huge journey. And really challenged my thoughts about my identity. This is at a point in my life where I had journeyed with the Enneagram for a long time. So I felt self-aware. I felt, like it was something that was conscious to me. But when I hit that inflection point and found myself on this failure experience and rejection, it really challenged a lot for me. And I found myself coming back to the Enneagram in a really important way. Because it was through that lens that I started to recognize the ways that I wasn't even aware of ways that I was playing into someone else's idea of success. And having that failure experience opened that up and revealed that. And I realized, ooh, I think I'm living out someone else's idea of what success is. And I don't actually know what that is for me. So that was my earliest steps with even the topic of my book, knowing what you want, because I realized at that point, I don't actually know how to answer that apart from what this organization or what other people have told me I should want. And I've sort of taken that in. And it was almost like at that point in my life, paying attention to what my desires were became like a spiritual practice for me. So again, I tell this story in the book of 40 days doing one thing every single day just because I wanted to. And that really cut toward, I think, my unhealthy tendencies of the 3 and got to a very honest place. Like, what do I want? I can't fake that for someone else. I can't fit that into someone else's. That's just has to come from me. And it has to come from a listening to what is just honest and authentic.
I love that. I love that. I think what you're describing is that journey of shedding inherited generational scripts that people hand to us. Those scripts could be from our parents, from their parents, from our culture. I was telling someone the other day that the script that I inherited as a young guy growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut was, you go to boarding school, then you go to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Cornell, Brown, Bowdoin, Williams, Amherst, Dartmouth, Haverford, Swarthmore. I could actually name the schools, right? And back then it wasn't Stanford yet. And then you went to one of those schools, and then you went to work on Wall Street. You went to work at an investment bank. You went to work for, back then, like Goldman Sachs or Bear Stearns when it was still a company, et cetera. And there was this kind of like expected script. And this is what guys from my background did. And I was an artist. And I was like, this doesn't fit. And it was such a hard thing, but it was a necessary. I had to amputate that script and find out what I wanted. It took a minute. It took a while.
Yeah.
Took a while. So I definitely identify with that idea of finding out what you want and separating it out from what everybody else told you wanted.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
That was hard. Yeah.
And I love that word script because that's how it feels. You're kind of following a script. Or someone described it to me recently as like, I feel like I'm living on autopilot. Like I'm just kind of going through this autopilot kind of life.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about, for a minute, 3s with a 2-wing is funny, right? Because you have this drive toward achievement, but you also have a drive toward connection.
Yes.
At the same time. Both are super important. And how you navigated the tension in your own life between, let's say, image and authenticity and productivity and presence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Between winning and connection.
Right. And I think that's where I like to think part of my journey has led me to this point. So I do leadership coaching and consulting, and I feel like I found my way to live that out because basically what I'm helping to do is to help other people succeed. And I'm cheering them on, and I'm empowering them, and I'm equipping them and training them. And I feel like that's some of the best of what we 3s can do is to say, hey, I believe in you. What does success look like for you? But to do this in a way that's very connective and very attuned to what does that person want? Like, because we, as much as I try to shed those scripts, as you say, I think it's so important for all of us to do that and get to this point where we can really, truly start to pay attention to what we want and trust that leads to connection and trust that leads to good for our communities or for others. And it's not just a selfish thing. It's actually a pathway into what's right for us and our way of embodying good.
So I'm a big fan of St. Augustine.
Yes.
And talking about who frequently wrote about human desire. And I'm also, even some contemporaries, Ronald Rolheiser writes about desire. The Augustinians, our new pope, right? And so we've actually used 2 words so far, and I want to make sure that our language is precise. There's desire, there's want, and then I'm going to throw in another word, which is longing. So how would you differentiate between let's just start with a want and a desire.
Oh, this is an interesting conversation to have with you. So I'd love to hear how you define those. I think I have actually gone a different tack with that because I think that for a lot of the folks that I'm working with, when they embark on trying to answer that question, like, what do you really want? What is your longing, or what is your desire? Because in some sense, I feel like conversationally those get intermixed. But a lot of times, at least for the folks that I work with, that immediately brings up a knee-jerk reaction of shame or self-judgment. Like, oh, this is wrong for me to think about this. This is selfish. This is not coming from the right motives. I need to only think about others, and they don't themselves consider, sort of that interior reality. And so I think I've found that rather than trying to overly sort that out in the beginning, I found it helpful for people to have a little bit of space to be like, you may not know at the beginning. Is it a want? Is it a desire? Is it something that you're meant to follow all the way through to action? Or is it meant to just be something you listen to and pay attention to as a way to connect with God? But opening up some space around that, I have found actually to be, again, helpful for the folks that I am chatting with. But I'd be curious how you define that.
Well, it's tricky, right? And it's nuanced. I think, first of all, I agree with you. And I think that desire as a word gets sensualized, and people think, oh, that's bad. Shame. Desire has to do with sex. It's like that's a Christian kind of obsession with, kind of like sexual immorality. Sure. It's like this strange obsession. And I think where people like Augustine and others would have written that desire is beautiful. Mm-hmm. Desire is beautiful. And in fact, there's a contemporary writer who I like a lot. His name is James Finley. Do you know? In fact, he's a really close friend of Richard Rohr's. He works with Richard quite a bit. And he says desire is the echo of God's voice in the human heart.
Oh, I love that.
So desire is the echo of God's voice in the human heart. So desire is like a really good thing. Yeah. And actually its desire is, from Augustine's perspective, would be the place where you meet God is at the point of your desire.
Yeah.
Right? That in fact, you should explore desire, right? Now, there are such things as disordered desires.
Yes, of course.
Right? So tell me, how do you discern good desire, healthy desire from a disordered desire? That's the term Augustine would have used.
Yeah, I like that term. Yeah, I've been really influenced by Ignatian spirituality as well, which I think really sees your wants and desires as a way to hear from God and to connect with God. And I think that a way of sorting through that is to listen and be honest about that. Because again, I find so many folks, especially if you've been around church contexts, are highly suspicious of desire. So they don't even take that time to be honest or to listen at all and sort of immediately shut things down. I think the thing that I try to tell folks is, it really goes to how you see God. Do you think God is big enough to be in dialogue with you if a desire is disordered? Or do you feel like that's all on yourself to just figure out and tamp it down? So I think trusting that if you believe in a good, loving God that you're in relationship with, you can also trust that insight can come, but you don't have to be so afraid of the whole notion. Or to your point, it's not that every single desire is disordered. There are some really beautiful, important, sacred ones.
Yeah. Hey, friends. Workplace stress is now one of the top causes of declining mental health, with 61% of the global workforce experiencing higher than normal levels of stress. And while taking some time away from work can help, trust me, it isn't a long-term solution to stress. Don't forget that therapy can help you navigate whatever challenges the workday or any day might bring. A good therapist can help you develop positive coping skills to help you set strong boundaries and find balance in the workplace and at home. Check out BetterHelp. With their fully online program, BetterHelp not only makes therapy more affordable, but also more convenient. You can join a session with the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work
with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/typology podcast. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/typology podcast.
Yeah, I think sometimes a want is more ego originated. So this is a little simplistic, but sometimes it's fleeting or it's externally influenced. It could be rooted in a sense of lack or deprivation.
Right.
So it's like, I want a promotion, or I want people to like me, or I want, you know what I mean? And it's about getting something outside of yourself to make you feel whole, safe, or valuable on the inside. So, Merton would have associated wants more with his version of his understanding of what the false self was. But a desire is different. It's not ego originated. It's more soul originated. It actually is like, and I like how Carl Jung talks about desire, right? It's like the soul summons you towards something that your soul desires, right?
Yeah.
So, like, here's a question. Anthony, I got a question for you.
All right.
All right, you ready? All right. This is a question I've been asking my clients lately. Or not lately, just for years. I ask them the question, what has always been true about you as a human being from as early a time as you can remember? What has always been true of you from as early a time as you can remember?
I would say I was always creating.
Okay.
Always.
Right. See, all right. And then I could say, tell me more. And then you would go on and on. I go, tell me more. And I go, tell me more. And you would begin to, I guarantee you within 15 minutes, you'd be crying. You'd be talking about, because you'd be getting down. Because I don't know, Tracey, do you feel like desire is something that was planted in you from time immemorial? Like it's like something in you, and it gets buried by cultural forces and family forces and blah, blah, blah. But it's crying out. And if you don't respond to it, you're going to have things like depression or anxiety or, affairs, or you're going to do kooky things because this desire is waiting and burning in you and feels ignored.
Yeah, I think that's why that childhood question can be really significant. I'm always fascinated to hear people return to what did you love to do when you were young, when you were a kid, or sort of returning to that. So I think the idea of play is also really central in this whole journey, leaving room for that, for something to not be productive or not know what the point of it is exactly, except that it feels like joy and it feels like play. So for sure, I think that issue is important. But I also think there's some folks, and I think this has to do with culture, gender, a lot of different factors. I talk to a lot of folks who feel like, I don't think I've ever known what this was for me, or never been asked this, or, sort of the constant message has been, what you want does not matter. These things that are true about you, they need to be suppressed. And so I think, I think for a lot of us too, that can be the experience.
Man, I so appreciate you saying that. I mean, that was my experience growing up, right? Like you shouldn't want to be an artist.
Right.
Artists don't make money enjoying country clubs.
Right. That's right. How are you going to make money doing that?
How are you going to join the Metropolitan Club in New York? How are you going to do that if you don't make money, right? Like, it's like, I wasn't planning on it, right? And so it actually did cause me a lot of sorrow.
Sure.
that desire in me, I was made to kind of feel like that desire was abnormal.
Yes.
Or wrong, or lesser than.
Yeah, because I think that's a very common, I think, human experience. And I think I think of that as a capitalistic question, right? So rather than what do you want, the first questions back are, well, how are you going to make money off of that? How are you going to pay your bills? Is that going to be productive? And I think we have a lot of these types of questions, capitalistic questions, permission questions, pragmatic, like, would that really work? Are you really qualified to do any of this? So I feel like as soon as we try to ask this question, we get inundated with, either from other people or even just from our own minds, a whole slew of other questions that make it really hard to tease out.
And of course, this is what in the book you talk about desire fog, right? And is this kind of what we're talking about here? Like these forces in our lives create a kind of fog in which we lose connection or touch with our core desires, and then can't articulate what they are.
Yes,
right.
For sure. Yeah, I think a big reason why that happens is exactly what you described, right? Like even in your case, you knew what you wanted. You were able to identify that, which is such a gift. But again, to be met immediately with, but what about money? That, and again, we do this to ourselves. We do this to one another. I think it's second nature in a lot of ways, but I think to be able to reserve some space to say, well, yes, sure. We all do need to worry about how to pay our, electric bills, but could we hold some space for some more central, more core questions before we jump into all that?
Yeah. So when you have a client and you're trying to move them from confusion to confidence about their desire, their wants in life, how do you do it? I'm sure you talk about this in the book, right? Like how are you going to help people experience the magic of knowing what they want?
Well, I really try to help people start with this idea of what I call calibration. So paying attention to where you come alive, where you don't, because that's very specific to each one of us. That's very unique. And a lot of times I think we take that for granted because we assume it's not that important, or I don't really know how this wouldn't be true for everybody. Like maybe we all experience things this way. So we don't realize how truly rare and unique it is to pay attention to that wiring that we have, both what lights us up and what really doesn't. So this is a lot of where I have people start because that's very unique to the person. So my endless fascination is the fact that we all image God, but we all do that in very unique ways, very specific to who we are. So I think it helps to ground into that and to understand what that means for us. And then I think from there you can build off of like, okay, let's have some imagination. Let's have some fun with this. So an exercise that I tell people to do is write down 100 things that you want. Don't edit yourself. Just try to fill 100. And because our normal energy is trying to minimize what we want, for a lot of us, this is such an opposite energy to sit with it, to expand, to listen, and to be honest. And again, so you can start to build from that. And then finally to be able to experiment, to say like, okay, which of these are really for me to take next steps on? And a lot of times people get stuck because they think I have to have the exact right answer, what I know I want to do. Got to find that clarity before I can move. And oftentimes I find it much more helpful to say, no, if you can build in some experiments and start taking some steps, you can actually create a much better sense of clarity than just trying to think and think and think.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a group of people I'm involved with on a regular basis, and they oftentimes say, you can't think yourself into right action, but you can take action that leads to right thinking. Like, in other words,
I like that.
It's actually a little bit different. It's like, just take some action. Just act.
Exactly.
And then the thinking will follow.
That's right. Yeah. I tell people there are thinking questions and there are doing questions. And similar to that sentiment, you can't think your way through a doing question. Some things you just gotta go for it. You gotta try some things on for size, see how they fit. You don't pick your best, pair of jeans by just staring at them. Like you gotta get in the dressing room, try them on, see what fits, and go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So what's one practical exercise our folks can use to uncover their authentic desires? Like, then I'm going to hit some Enneagram stuff with you. But how do people get in touch with authentic desire?
Well, like I said, that exercise where you try to list 100 things and you sort of pushes most people out of their comfort zone to a place where folks will come back to me and say, I'm sort of surprised by some of these. I think I always wanted these, but I've never named them for myself. Sometimes people are very uncomfortable with even that exercise itself. They find it that's like unnerving. Sometimes people find it very enjoyable and fun. So even just paying attention to your emotional response to doing something like that, I find it says a lot. It tells you a lot. So that's often a good place to start is, sit down 20 minutes, see, or, if that feels like too much, set a timer, 5 minutes, see how many things you can write down. And again, it's so surprising to me over and over again how just that invitation, it can almost be triggering for some people or very illuminating. So I've seen wildly different responses to that. So it's not only the doing of it, but like I said, it's paying attention to what that surfaces for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably initially feel like there's something bad about doing this. Like I feel guilty for actually having desires or wants.
That's right. Yeah. I've had people say, this feels scary.
Yeah.
I feel scared. I'm like, I didn't say you had to share it with anybody. I didn't say you had to go post it on the internet. Like this is just by yourself. But people say, oh, that actually feels really scary.
Well, I mean, belief that if I want something, God doesn't. That my wants and God's wants are very different. Mine are simple. All my wants have bad motives underneath them.
Definitely.
And all of, you know what I mean? And it's like I have to almost deny myself. And so denying myself, they have a complete wrong understanding what that text means. Doesn't mean denying yourself doesn't mean negating all of the desires of your heart. The desires of your heart are beautiful.
Yeah.
And they're clues. They're clues as to the life you're called to live.
Yeah.
I'd say, and this is kind of one of the things that we talk about in my groups and, spiritual terms. I think it's that, that scripture that the heart is deceitful above all things. But that's the untended heart, right? The tended heart, from the tended heart is that wellspring flows, right? So, but I think in a lot of religious life, we tend to think, oh yeah, the heart is deceitful, so I can't trust whatever comes from there. So any desire that comes from the heart, I got to negate it.
That's right. It's kind of wholesale. Yeah. I in the book, I talk about, briefly mentioned this experience where I was planting tomatoes in my backyard out of a genuine desire, part of this journey of like the 40-day thing. And I remember doing that. And then I remember the next thing was feeling really guilty about it and feeling like, who would be mad at me to know that I'm thinking this way or doing this right now? And then to be like, wait, why do I think that? That's such a dramatic response. Like, why am that seems a little bit, out of step with what's happening here. I'm just planting tomatoes, so I think again, all those tapes that we have, all those narratives that we have about desires, it's really fascinating to have those become conscious for us and say like, what is my thinking about this come from? Where is that formed? And is that actually in line with what I understand about the character of God? Yeah.
Maybe we should almost replace the word desire with the phrase sacred longing. What is the sacred longing in you? Actually, what is the desire implanted in you that is calling something forth in you? Because I think desire is a kind of homing signal, right? It's the soul's homing signal, and it has to be discerned and not dismissed.
I love that.
Because and sometimes it needs to be purified.
For sure.
And that goes to this is why I think, by the way, for people that are listening, not only should they read your book, and by the way, so I remind people, the name of the book is The Magic of Knowing What You Want, but this is where spiritual direction comes in so great. Or a coach, not a therapist. I mean, therapists have a different role, I think. And I am a therapist, so I think I speak and I'm also a trained spiritual director. I think you're better off with a spiritual director. When you're when you talk about desire, discerning desire seems to be much more of a spiritual director's task than, or in their zone. That's my take. Because there's a kind of spirituality. It's not just psychology. There's a spirituality to desire that's like really important and needful. I think about that text where Jesus turns to disciples and says, "What do you want?"
For sure.
right?
I love that passage.
I know who does. I mean, I love that passage, but to your point, they're completely stymied when he does it. He's like, well, we just want to know where you live, which is like actually one of the goofiest answers in all of the Bible. It's like, what's your address?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
like, what?
They have no idea.
Like, yeah. And yet, if they knew that it was God himself saying, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And that God was actually curious about their desires.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a big idea.
Yeah.
As you know, I believe the Enneagram is one of the most powerful tools for developing self-awareness. But to gain the benefits, you need to know your type. Taking an Enneagram assessment is the first step toward understanding yourself and the people around you. It offers insights that can enhance your self-awareness, personal growth, emotional intelligence, your relationships. It's not just a one-time test. It's a lifelong tool that will help you navigate life with more clarity, purpose, and empathy. And now, when you take my brand new Typology Institute Enneagram assessment, you'll receive a research-backed, scientifically evidenced, comprehensive report that's easy to understand. Not only will you learn your dominant Enneagram type, but you'll gain insight into aspects of the Enneagram most other assessments don't cover, such as your dominant wing, your subtype, orientation to time, and even stances. Get your results today at typologyinstitute.com/assessment. Enter the discount code Typology Podcast on the checkout page to get 10% off your assessment. Again, that's typologyinstitute.com/assessment and enter Typology Podcast for 10% off. So in the Enneagram, I know you've got some mention of the Enneagram in the book. Not much, but some. You make like you tip your hat at it. Every type has what we call a basic desire and a core fear. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you played around with those, but like the basic desire for a 3, and you being a 3, you can comment on this, is to really feel valuable and worthwhile. People think, the basic desire is to be successful and to, well, that is a want of a 3, but it's actually the fear that they have is of being worthless or a failure, and so that their desire is to feel valuable and worthwhile. Does that ring true for you?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, you asked about wings. I don't know that I always strongly identify with wings, but I really identify with subtypes. So I identify with the self-preservation subtype.
So you're the counter type of the 3.
I am, yeah. So I'm not a like, hey, you got to like put all the limelight on me. That's not necessarily my energy, but for sure that core desire of like, oh no, if I don't prove my worthiness, if I don't prove my value, I probably am not. And that is very foundational. Mm-hmm.
So this is actually really interesting, right? Because I wonder if we were talking earlier about disordered desires, or maybe we could also say misguided desires. And in some ways, like for the 4, it's to find ourselves and our unique significance, right? Because 4s fear they have no identity, right? Who am I? And so they want to find themselves, and then that unique significance, that special significance. But that actually may be a misguided desire. Mm-hmm. Because does that make sense? Like I wonder if at the root of some of our Enneagram types, like for the 1, it's to be good, it's to be right, it's to be virtuous. That's the basic desire of 1. Or 2, to be loved and needed. Mm-hmm. And then 5, to be capable and competent and self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to go through them while we're here, right? 6 is to feel secure, certain, and supported. 7 is to be satisfied, not deprived, but satisfied and content. 8 would be to the basic desires to protect the self and remain in control. And then 9, to have peace, inner peace, outer peace, and stability, right? Mm-hmm. I wonder how these basic desires fit in your framework, if at all, like how they could be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can just start with myself as a 3. I think, again, my journey to really dive deeper into this idea of uncovering our desires and listening to them, it started with my own process. And I realized it was a very different journey to ask myself, what do I want? It was much more authentic, much more honest. And I think it required me, sort of forced me into saying, like, do I believe I'm valuable if I'm not proving it in these specific ways? And I just am. Mm-hmm. And I'm listening to myself, and I am just authentic about what that means for me. And so, for that part of my journey, I thought, it must just be threes that can struggle with knowing what they want. This must be a 3 thing. And as I've talked to folks of different types, I actually think each type has a different potential barrier to paying attention to what they truly want or what they long for.
Tell me more.
Well, for example, like you said, ones. I find for a lot of my one folks that I talk to, they don't feel like that's okay. They don't feel like that's a virtuous thing to do. And so they don't do it. They're like, that I shouldn't. Like, I should only pay attention to the shoulds and this question of want that feels threatening because that doesn't seem right. Or I think for, say, like a type 6, to trust that what they want is good. It requires like a self-trust that is often a healing part of, again, like 6 is integrating well.
Yeah.
So again, I think each type has a way that this whole question of paying attention to longing and desire, it becomes a little bit tricky. Or, for 2s, it's like, well, I'm focused on that for everyone around me. I know what everyone around me wants, and I know how to meet those needs and desires, but I don't think about myself. I don't know that for me.
What about for 4s, do you think?
For 4s, I think, that's a good question. I'd be curious what your experience is. That one is trickier. I tend to think for 4s, it can be difficult to not assume that they always need more out of that sense of like deficiency that 4s can carry. Like, I'm deficient, so I got to go find the thing. So sometimes the journey to desire is to trust that what you have is a good thing to desire versus always kind of looking for the additive thing outside of yourself.
Yeah, I also think the inner world of 4s can be emotionally so chaotic that it would be sorting through all the desires to figure out which was the real one.
Yes.
There's just so many desire to be known, to be understood, to be authentic, the desire to be special and unique, the desire to leave an imprint on the world, desire for transcendent meaning, the desire, everything is desire, right?
That's right.
And getting them to actually land on or to take action on a desire instead of just swimming in desire.
That's right. I hear that from 7s as well. A similar dynamic of like, what are you talking about?
Yes.
I want all the things,
it's different though for them, particularly for self-present socials in particular, because those sexual 7s, 1-to-1 7s can have a spiritual edge too. So, or a kind of not mystical edge or openness to that in a very kind of strangely suggestible way. But I mean, I think 7s definitely, there's that fear of being deprived.
Right.
So it's like, give me everything because
right.
I'm just because if you leave one thing out, maybe that's the one thing that's going to bring me the satisfaction I want, So, the old trope, and I hate to say it, right? The Augustine quote, because every single faith-based book in the world has it quoted, right? We all know what it is. It's so obnoxious, right? But the heart is restless until it finds its home in thee, right? How do we know when a desire is consistent in our hearts with what it is that God has for us in this life?
Well, I think this is where I come back to all of this journey. Like at its best, I think one of the things that the Enneagram does for us is it helps us pay attention to our embodied experience. So it's not just head knowledge, right? Like I know that you teach this. This isn't just meant to be head knowledge about yourself. This is actually meant to be transformational. and show you how to move forward in greater health and wholeness. And I think a huge part of that is that embodiment. That's why I think, again, it's so important to pay attention to who are you? How are you made? What's right for you? What's not right for you? Because truly there's so many ways. There's so many. God is such a creative God. Like look at creation to see like God loves variety. Clearly there's not just one kind of bird. There's 100,000, God loves variety. And I think because of that, what I take from that is there's so many ways to bring about good. So the key isn't just like, here's a one size fits all. I think the key is paying attention to what's really right for you. And that comes down to knowing yourself, knowing what, again, brings you joy and lights you up and what doesn't. And knowing that, again, that's a really unique blueprint for who you are. So the quote I always come back to and can't stop quoting is the Howard Thurman quote, which says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So I think about that. I think about how there's a lot of paths to good, but the fit of what that looks like in a person's life, it really comes down to knowing how they've been designed.
Wow, I love this conversation. Everyone, we've been talking with Tracey Gee, the author of The Magic of Knowing What You Want. Subtitle is A Practical Guide to Unearthing the Wisdom of Your Desire. She is an Enneagram 3. She is on her game. And by the way, a self-pres 3, which we didn't even get into the conversation around self-pres 3s. The 3 that most resents being a 3.
It's real. I told you, I'm always embarrassed when I say, yeah, I'm a 3.
So funny.
Yeah, I know. But I'm a self-pres 3. Oh, and so that just means you're vain about not being vain.
Ouch.
That's hilarious.
I know, but it's true.
It's a zinger, Ian. I'm going to sit with that one. I'm going to have to sit with that.
Everybody. Well, it's actually not original, but it's actually that's Claudio Naranjo who said that that's the vanity is around not being vain, which is why so many self-pres 3s either think they're 1s or 6s.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, so everybody, the magic of knowing what you want. Tracey Gee, the author, thank you so much for being on Typology. It's been a joy speaking with you. And Anthony, Bub, it's a delight.
Always.
What are you doing this weekend, Anthony? I'm just curious.
What am I doing this weekend? Man.
Yeah, just curious. Before I wrap up the show,
well, the next thing on my list, I'll just give you what the next thing on my list is at the end of this day is I'm hooking up with a tailor to get a vest made for me because I am officiating my brother's wedding at the end of the month. So,
oh,
yeah.
Oh,
yes.
If you want, I'll lend you a couple of bucks and you get the whole suit. I mean, I don't.
They don't want me to do that.
I'm just kidding you, man. I'm just kidding you. All right, I got some plans for you for Saturday night. And Tracey, you can join us. We're going to go see our old friend Russ Taff in Columbia.
I am going to be doing that, actually. A buddy of mine, is filming the whole thing.
Oh.
All right. Well, Steve Taylor's putting it on, so we're all going to be there together. Steve called me and said, "You got to come." I'm like, "All right." Tracey, you're welcome to come join us. It's going to be a festive night. Hey, everybody, we wish you all could join us every day. May you have love. May you have joy. May you have peace. May you have healing. May you have rest. Until next time.